Hey, what's going on, everybody? Dr. Medic here. As you know, the 7th TF2 comic just recently released. Well, I actually wrote this script on the 20th of December, 2024, and I'm recording this audio on the 23rd of December, 2024, so for me, it just came out recently. But it will have been about 4 months at the planned release of this video if I get it out on time, April 10th. Still rather recent, seeing that the comic before it came out on the 10th of January, 2017. So, in reality, it's still rather recent. You see, I didn't have a video planned for April. This is mostly due to just school and the fact that I play sports. If you don't know, I play baseball, and I'll be playing in the spring, so I'll have a little bit less time to be able to get stuff done, so I needed this extra month to be able to work on another video. But I thought this video could hold you guys over until we get back to my normal schedule in May. I was reading the 7th comic, and the very first thing that caught my eye, no doubt, was Jacked Marasmus. You may say, Doc, why Jack Merasmus? Why was that the first thing that caught your eye? Number one, I'm a huge fitness nerd, so as soon as I saw the bench press and all that stuff, I was like, oh my god, this is amazing. Number two, a video I completed in, I believe, early August, but released in November 2024. I think I pushed it back a month, so yeah, it was November 2024. I made a video where I went over how much I believe the TF2 non-playable characters could lift if they entered a hypothetical powerlifting contest of sorts. That video was a sequel where I did the same exact thing, but for the 9 playable classes, and I evaluated them. In the November video, light spoilers here, Merasmus was one of the characters I examined. Now, most of you probably didn't know this, since at the time of recording, that video has just over 200 views. You may have seen it, but there's a good chance you haven't. Like I said, light spoilers, Merasmus didn't score all that well. This was prior to the comic, in which the only time we ever saw him, he was rather slender and lanky. However, he had 7 years in prison to get absolutely swole, which, in my opinion, he did do naturally. I ain't buying it. Look, I know prisoners tend to get really jacked when they come out of prison due to being cooped up for hours on end with pretty much nothing better to do most of the time. Maybe you could play cards, but like, you have so much time to just work out and get fit. But this is outrageous. Plus, you could definitely get gear in prison. I don't believe the whole prisoner's testosterone doubles while in prison due to XY reasons. Maybe it increases a little bit for whatever reason, but I don't believe it doubles. And yeah, some do actually double, but it's because they hop on cycle. You can get weed, crack, meth, heroin, acid, whatever the hell you want in prison, but not gear? Yeah, I don't buy it. I don't think so. Now that I've gotten that out of the way, in this mini video, I'm going to just re-examine Merasmus, natural or not. Do what I did in the first video, but with this new updated information that we have. Let me tell you, I think he's going to score so much better. This intro has already been like 3 minutes long. I apologize. Let's just get right into this.
Marasmus the Wizard has come for your souls!
Let's not even mess around with all the nonsense. Before we talk about his lifts, let's just update the information on him. In the original video, I said he was around 6,000 years old, which he is now 7 years older than that. No issue there. I also stated that he's approximately 6'6" and 170 pounds. For Merasmus, we saw in the comic before the 7th, this was pretty much accurate in my opinion. He could have been a little heavier, maybe around 185-ish. He could have also been a bit taller than I originally stated. I said Zana was around 6 foot, maybe 6'1", and in this panel, there's about a 5 to 7 inch difference, so maybe he's more like 6'7" or 6'8". I also believe that he's probably around now 275 pounds. Now you gotta realize, this is at 6'7" or 6'8". There's a few panels where we can kind of see him at different angles. I don't think he's a super mass monster, somebody like Ronnie Coleman levels of just insanity. But he's still rather big, a little bit leaner, so I think around 275 pounds or so would be pretty correct on how much he weighs. It might be more like 280 or 290, maybe even up to 300. It's impossible to tell, because here's the thing, when it comes to the comics, he's not drawn the same every single time. I mean, you see him in this one panel right here where he's sitting up talking to that Diego guy, and like, he's big as hell, like he's huge. But here's the thing, that's kind of just a camera trick. You know, it's kind of closer up to him, it makes him look bigger, and then we see him in this other panel, and he looks a little bit skinnier, still huge, don't get me wrong, but a little bit skinnier, so somewhere around 275 to 290 is realistic in my opinion. Now, let's talk about the bench press. Not just because it's every man's favorite compound exercise, but because it is what we see him doing at the beginning of the comic. Merasmus now has great arm development, a solid chest, and a solid back. While only one of these seems important, you'd be surprised what building all of these components can do to your bench, especially if you have a weak bench. The chest is obvious, seeing as it is the primary driver of the bench press. Unless you're doing a really close grip bench where your hands are pretty much together, the chest is going to be the most important aspect of a bench press. However, you cannot sleep on the back and the shoulders. The shoulders are pretty straightforward. They help stabilize your arms. If you had a bum shoulder, you realize how important the delts are for the bench press, since they're pretty much the second or third in line when it comes to muscles activated by the bench press. And he has very strong, big shoulders, which probably make it easier for him to stabilize the weight. Strong biceps and forearms are never a bad thing to have under any circumstance, since they will aid in making sure the bar doesn't shake too much. And also, if you have a little bit of form leak, and it goes onto your bicep a little bit, it'd be nice to have some cushion, if you will, and take some stress off the shoulders. But most importantly, on the arm, other than the shoulders themselves, are the triceps. Unless you are just using a stupid wide grip, which Marasmus does not seem to have, he seems to have more of a moderate grip, maybe a little bit wide, you need strong triceps, which we can see Marasmus does seem to have, and these are the second to third in line as a main mover. So he's got a pretty strong upper body for sure. That's all fine and dandy, but why is the back important? Well, because the back is your main foundation. A lot of people struggle because they haven't been training long enough, but second, they have poor leg drive, which doesn't seem to be the case for Marasmus. But what I'm actually trying to get at is that they're not really engaging their back well. If you engage your lats, you'll find that your upper body is far more stable, and the weight doesn't shake nearly as much since you basically have cemented them in place. Then you have the core and traps, which are developed on Merasmus, but they play a smaller role in how much you could bench. They're important, don't get me wrong, you need to have a decent enough core to stabilize yourself, and your traps do help, but they're like lower priority. Honestly, I'd say they're almost lower priority than your legs, in a way. Maybe not. You know what? I take that back. About the bench press weight, though, Merasmus is about the same size as Brian Shaw, the world's strongest man winner 2011, 2013, 2015, and 2016. But this is more in terms of height. As for weight, Brian Shaw was around 400 pounds back then, and he was far more bulbous. This is due to him being a strongman competitor and not something akin to a bodybuilder or someone who likes to lift weight. This is why I said Merasmus is probably around 290 pounds or so at like 15% body fat. You could go up to 20, but honestly, I'm leaning more towards 15%, which is not too bad. Okay, but is he good at benching? I don't care about all this. You've talked pretty much about everything, but how much he can lift. Screw you, Doc. Tell me how much Merasmus can lift. Okay, sorry. Well, we can see that he was pretty easily repping 315 or 3 plates, unless those are kilogram plates, which I don't believe they would be. That's quite impressive, even at his size. So he has some solid bench pressing strength, even if he is a bit enhanced. If I were to make a guess on how much I believe he could bench press right now, I would say his 1 rep max would be anywhere from 450 to 525 pounds. So we'll put him down for 485 pounds or 10 under 5 plates. It could be significantly more, or it could be a little bit less, as we're not exactly sure how many times he reps 315. Assuming that is 315, because there's also the chance those are 100-pound plates, but those are pretty rare. You don't really see them much, and most old prisons, typically they're going to have 45. That's the standard. So we're just going to assume it's 315 for the sake of argument. T-Bone, this big dude that was egging him on for 2 more, that just tells us he got 2 reps minimum, but this seems to be at the end of his set. We can assume that he was basically grinding to get close to failure. Though how many reps he did prior to this is completely unknown. I'm guessing 10 to 20, but who knows for sure. This may seem low, but I think some people don't realize how insane of a bench press this is, especially at that body fat percentage and size in general. He has long arms, which I partially took into account in my guess. I believe that 485 is more than reasonable and could teeter on being a bit generous at times. Though seeing he is enhanced, huge, and trained like a madman, 485 is within reach for someone his size and with his chemical enhancements. He has also been likely training for 7 years that entire time. Maybe he's only been training for a year, he's been using a little bit of magic in there, but I'd assume he's been training that entire time, and I doubt he trained much prior to it. This is a long time for sure, and longer than most people, but in the grand scheme of things, this is a moderate amount of time in the gym overall. Not dissing them, don't get me wrong. Also remember, I'm not taking into account magic. I know I just brought up the dark magic, but I'm not taking that into account. Don't bring it up in the comments, please. Actually, go ahead and bring it up in the comments. That gets engagement. Thank you. Now that we talked endlessly about the bench, let's take it to most gym bros' least favorite lift. But we have to go over it. I'm sorry. It's the back squat. I do believe, based off his aesthetics, he does train upper body far more than he trains lower body, just like any normal gym bro. But judging off this panel, he does train his legs on occasion, you can tell. He doesn't suffer from chicken leg syndrome. He has decent calves, though that's really all we can see. He had these bright orange pants on, rolled up a little bit, and we can hardly see his quads. If they matched his calves, I'd say he has pretty decent development. But they're not popping out of his prisoner outfit. They fit pretty comfortably in there, seemingly even with a bit of bagginess, so it's hard to say for sure. Like I said though, judging based off his calves, unless he has some weird calf raised fetish or he just has unbelievable calf genetics that I would literally kill a man for, and may have killed a man for, he would be training upper legs too. His strong upper body and core will also help him brace well and allow him to squat heavier than if he didn't have any of these traits. Strong traps extremely important since that's what you put the bar on in the first place, unless you're just one of those really low bar French lifters who put it on a lower back. But most people, either it's going to be your traps or your lower delts, which is, it's not technically your traps, but it's going to be on the bottom of them. A strong core, obviously, for bracing, and even a strong upper back, but specifically lower back, is super important for keeping a strong base. Without a strong base, no matter how big you are, the weight will demolish you and you will fold like a pancake. That didn't make any sense. If we take someone at his height with his dedication, since remember, this isn't just any 6'7"-ish jack dude, this is a dude who is enhanced and has been in prison with pretty much almost nothing better to do than work out for an entire 7 years since he's been there. And also at the time he had weights, which most prisons I don't believe have weights anymore, but at the time he did. Plenty of time to gain some serious size. I would say that 500 to 600 pounds is definitely in the cards for him. It's hard to narrow down an answer since there's so much room for speculation and headcanon. I honestly am not 100% sure, though he would likely squat in the mid-5s, around 550. This may seem close to his bench, but looking at his proportions, I wouldn't be surprised if this wasn't far off, to be honest. I have known people in real life who actually bench press more than they can squat. They exist for sure. Merasmus, I don't believe, is this unproportionate, but I think it's rather close. So there's my guess. 550 pounds on the squat, which I actually believe he does high bar. If he does low bar, he may be able to squeeze out 6 plates or 585 pounds, though it's impossible to say for sure. Enough about this lift. Let's go look at the only lift that truly matters in a powerlifting contest. That's a joke, by the way. The deadlift. So the deadlift, which he most certainly pulls conventional, not just because Marasmus is 6,000 years old and I think he's a conventional deadlift elitist, but because someone of this size especially would actually benefit more from a conventional stance rather than sumo. I'm not someone who personally believes sumo is cheating, however I will say for smaller or rather lighter lifters, which typically are the same thing, sumo is often an advantage due to range of motion and general body biomechanics. However, when you are taller, standing with your feet closer achieves a similar effect, opposite to lighter lifters. It's kind of weird. There is still personal preference as smaller lifters do pull conventional from time to time, and some top-level heavier lifters also decide to pull sumo, but in general, lighter lifters tend to excel more at sumo deadlifts, while heavier and taller lifters tend to excel more at a conventional deadlift. Even though it seems like it really wouldn't matter, it does. Back to what we were saying though, Merasmus has decent leg development, which we speculated back in the squat segment, so he probably has pretty good leg drive and he can drive the weight up pretty well. He also has a strong upper back and likely a strong lower back too. The lower back is pretty obvious since the deadlift heavily involves the lower back and spinal erectors, but having strong lats and being able to engage them properly, which I personally struggle with sometimes, is super important for having an impressive deadlift. He also has pretty long arms. Short arms force a person to have to cover more distance with the bar in order to lock out around their waist. People with longer arms can lock out much lower. You may have seen those deadlift specialists who have super short torsos and super short femurs and super long arms, so they lock out around their knees. For example, I have a 6'2.5" wingspan and about 6 feet tall, so I lock out just above mid-thigh-ish. Some people have even larger wingspans and can lock out above the knees, which is crazy to see. And then some people I know have much shorter arms and have to lock out almost above their waist. Not literally, not like T-Rex arms, but much higher. Marasmus has long-ish arms for his height, so this more than likely will allow him to lift a lot more than if he had more average or short arms. In my opinion, Merasmus has what it takes to be a deadlift specialist. I believe, judging off his size and stature once again, he could probably deadlift about 2.5 times body weight, probably a bit more, possibly, maybe, I don't know, which would put him around the 725 to 775 pound deadlift range. So we'll just even that out to 750. This is impressive, and some may say he could probably deadlift more like 3 times body weight, but here's the thing, some fail to realize that the square cube law exists in people too. Sorta. Okay, oversimplified it. What I mean is, you can't just scale something up with the same limitations, those limitations being what the human body can handle and how the human body is just structured. Someone who's smaller is going to be able to be stronger pound for pound due to their more compact size. As you expand, the human body isn't able to maintain that 1-to-1 ratio of strength to size, especially if you factor in fat. This is why you can see some lighter lifters, such as those in the 50 to 70 kilogram weight class, lift up to like 3, 4, even 5 times body weight, if not more than that, sometimes. Yet, those at the top, who are the best deadlifters in the world, like the heaviest deadlifters, are much closer to 2 to 3 times body weight. I know what I said is a bit of a jumbled mess, and some people could probably explain it far better than I can, but because of his size, his body weight to lift ratio is going to be much closer than a great lifter in a lower weight class. It's kind of strange, but if you lift, you know what I'm talking about. I'm going to stick to my 750 pound deadlift estimate for Merasmus. That will do it for the video. I hope you guys enjoyed. Give me your feedback and also leave a comment down below with your opinion. I would love to hear from you all. If you haven't seen that video I put back out in November, I do highly recommend that you check it out. Thank you, and I will catch you next time in May.